Hello, this is Jason again with ShySnake. This will be part 2 of our technical videos on SpyDNA. So I'm going to talk a bit about our damage system now. I have a test area set up here in the editor. I also have a variety of inventory for demonstration purposes. So why don't we start with this P60. It's a light pistol. It's the kind of thing you'd be able to conceal on a mission to a dinner party. It will fit under a jacket, be hard for the enemy to detect. But you'll see how it'll work in practice. So I'm going to just engage each of these targets once to see how... Actually, I'll double tap them. Why not?
Target eliminated.
So from left to right, there's different types of armors that I've given each of them.
Target is down.
So the guy on the far left had no armor. This guy I just hit had no armor. The guy in the suit had what you'd be considered light armor. It's an armored business suit. And these guys on the right, that one just had a military vest, and this guy has a full military combat suit. We'll eventually get models for those. Right now we don't have the models for the heavier armors. Okay, so I have a shortcut key. I can show you actually the enemy status. So the first guy, severely injured. You can mouse over the injuries to see how bad they are. So roughly 50 points is the damage that it recorded. It'll vary depending on what you hit. And the damage isn't damage in the traditional sense of number of hit points. We don't have hit points. In this case, it's damage in terms of how much it disrupted inside the target. But those effects we'll actually discuss in a bit. So if I look at some of the others here, you can see 2 hits. Both were indicated as stopped by the armor. Let's close that. Yeah, and this guy is, bleeding out. That's not a good status. So he will not be long for this world. And on these 2, they were certainly blocked by armor. So to go into a little bit of detail on that, the P60, you can see in the inventory screen, things are rated on how much damage they can do. This is a log scale, so for every point of damage going up, it's actually doing twice as much to the target. Penetration, you can see it's very low on that weapon. So if we switch to something heavier, let's give them this and try the remaining targets again. So we'll go left to right here. Okay, so that one did something.
Target eliminated.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go through. You can see it's still getting blocked by the armor. So, but more interesting, let's look at this guy. You see the little thing spinning above his head? That indicates he's stunned at the moment. The other thing to notice is you can see in the mouse over, it's actually showing you the amount of damage the shot was going to do and the amount that actually did after the character's armor they were wearing. So that armor, dropping it from 7.8 damage class to a 1.8, that's a decrease of 6. So that's almost a 30x decrease in the amount of damage the shot did. So that's a huge improvement. Unfortunately, it's still not all that good, given the status over here that he's, if I wait, eventually that character will die. It will go from stunned. He'll probably get unstunned for a while and then collapse. And this guy with the heavy armor, it's still going to block everything from this pistol. So I'm going to go back to the inventory and get out this P19. It's designed for anti-armor use. You you can see on the penetration graph, it's actually considerably higher. Unfortunately for military armor, it's probably still not going to be good enough. Let me do a burst here.
Target eliminated.
But for things like this armored suit that this guy was wearing, oh, and now I've caused even more injury. But these are relatively low damage, but they have a high armor penetration. So for targets that you expect to be armored, it would be preferable to take one of those over the conventional pistols. And they're also concealable. But one of the things we didn't talk about earlier is we have a true anatomical model of the targets. So in this case, you can see it actually caused a spinal injury, which means that even if the character wasn't, severe, I won't say severely injured, that is a severe injury, but even if they weren't going to go down from the shot normally, when you cause a critical, you hit something critical like that, effectively it is a mission ender for that NPC. And we actually track several different things that can cause different types of status injuries. Arms can disable your ability to use certain weapons. Legs will impair movement. So let's try it over here. I remember giving this guy an armored vest. This pistol may not be quite heavy enough to get it done against that vest, but let's give it a try. Yeah, it's still not quite good enough at penetration 17. So I'm going to reset this so I can get a new full set, and we'll go on to some of the heavier stuff. So when you're engaging heavier armored targets, there's a couple more things you can use. So we were talking earlier about, you can see the penetration on these and how it compares on the right, and also how the damage compares. But when you move to the longer weapons, you can see the rifle, the conventional rifle, maintains almost the same armor penetration as the armor-piercing pistol, but combines it with a lot more damage. And you compare it to the rifle that's designed for anti-armor use, and you get a lot more armor penetrating ability. So let's try these. I'll use this one first. Oop, already put it in his hand, her hand. Actually, I'll show you, we have a queuing system, so I'm going to pause it, and I'll queue up some orders here. And put a little extra ammo on these targets that are, just dump the rest of the clip.
Target's down. Target eliminated. Target eliminated.
And you see we're empty. So just going left to right here. Yeah, basically this will cause a lot of damage very rapidly. This warning comes up when things are about to be over for the target. Yeah, this one also very bad shape. So one of the things happened here is we simulate over penetration on the rounds. So you can see I actually hit both. Oh yeah, this one pretty much racked up all the status. Out of breath is simulating a lung injury. So this character, assuming the other injuries didn't get him, would eventually suffocate. But also when we talk about the energy system with movement, that would effectively impair stamina too. So if you had an injury like that and you were trying to sprint, the combination is going to cause you a lot of trouble. So here, this guy had the heavier armor that's completely stopped the pistol we were using. It looks like this gun had just enough to make it through, but not do any, not do much after the fact. So this character would almost certainly live through this, and he'll probably be unstunned in a moment. And then we have the guy we didn't do anything against the heavy armor. So I'll reset, escape, and play it again. And I'll just skip over the others and go to these two. Yeah, I guess I may have to tone that armor down a little bit. Yeah, so you see this was more effective against the armor than the other one. So, I mean, this guy is actually in trouble. But this heavy combat suit is, if you run into enemies with them in combat, you're going to need something more significant. So let's up the ante here a little bit. So this is probably, I think, the best assault rifle in the game. It's a Gauss rifle.
Target eliminated.
And we'll finish this guy too.
Target is down.
Could have spent more time aiming, and that's why the first shot was a little wild. So we can check. Yeah, you can see there with the higher penetration, it's just basically carving right through the armor. Because while the armor stopped 20 points, since it was starting with 74, it was still a lot of more than adequate. Okay, and here I'll go on to the last weapon that I was going to demo, which is our 10mm sniper rifle. So you can see very high damage and reasonable armor penetration. So it should work, especially since most of the time with a rifle like that, you're not aiming for the heavy armor. You're going to be aiming for the softer points. Like, we'll just...
Target's down.
So here you can see, effectively one shot. Even though the armor took a lot of the energy out of it, it wasn't nearly enough. So here, and this is the person we've been having trouble with because of the heavy armor.
Target eliminated.
Yeah. With the heavy armor this guy's wearing, he actually will probably, or could survive that, unlike the other one, but it was still enough to take him out of the battle. So one other thing I'll quickly show you, or talk about. For the damage model, we actually model it, it's based on the velocity of the round. So we compute over the distance how much velocity the thing loses over distance. And anytime it hits something, that subtracts from the penetration. But we can actually reverse that equation. So we can determine how much the thing has been slowed by the armor, and then we can recompute the damage. So, for instance, when you hit armor, and it, say, cuts the penetration in half, we can actually compute the correct damage for the projectile at that point. Let me show you for example here. So, for instance, if you went from, on the P19, say you took out half the penetration, you went from here down to, say, somewhere over here, you can look up on the graph and see there wouldn't be much damage left. So armor a lot of times will slow the projectiles to the point where they're much less lethal. I mean, they still can be lethal, especially in volume. But it's a very detailed model, and what we're finding is in practice, even if you don't know all the nitty-gritty about what's going on behind the scenes, it just kind of makes sense to the player. So, and with that, I'll conclude on our damage system and go on to the next section.